Hello and welcome to Curated Spaces, the podcast that explores the stories behind spaces reimagining how we stay, work and play. Join me, Molly Cooper, as I sit down with founders, owners and thought leaders to hear about their journey of bringing a space to life. Great spaces shape our lives. They inspire, nurture and connect us. But most importantly, they bring us together to share life's milestones with the people who mean the most to us. So whether you're a traveller, foodie or design seeker, join us as we celebrate the power of spaces and the brilliant people behind them. Today I'm sitting down with Hector, one of the founders of Unplugged, whose off-grid cabins allow you to reconnect with nature during a 3-day digital detox. With all cabins just an hour or so from cities such as London and Manchester, each one is beautifully designed for slow living in nature. I'm so excited to dive into the story behind Unplugged and learn about the journey of bringing this brilliant concept to life. Hector, welcome to Curated Spaces. How are you doing?
Molly, it's so good to be here. Thank you for the wonderful intro.
Not at all.
I can.
No, I've been so looking forward to this chat. I know that amongst my friends, at least, Unplugged is like, you have to go, you have to detox. It's a must do. So I'm very excited to get into that. But before we do, let's chat about you for a minute. I'd love to hear your story and where you've come from and how you ended up at Unplugged.
For sure. So similar to you, after university, didn't really know what to do. So ended up working for a tech startup and basically applied to a whole bunch of jobs. Didn't get any of them. So a friend of mine said, why not go work at a startup for a year and then reapply to everything? And applied to 20 different startups. One of them offered me a job, which was iPad-based till systems, a company called Nobly POS. And the rest is history, as they say. So I joined as employee number 2. My now co-founder, Ben, was employee number 1. So actually the first time we met was in my job interview. And it was really fun. It was, as many of these things are, it was a little bit of a shit show behind the scenes, but it was also a fantastic experience. And over the next 3 years, we grew to 70 people, launched in the US, Australia. So lots of flying around the world to set up these offices. So a lot of fun, but also just started to get, I would say, burnt out with it, but really started to lose my joy for life. Was kind of spending a lot of time on my phone. Just found myself getting busy, like a real dissatisfaction. So I just threw myself into, both work and also going out and just started to lose the joy for life. And then at the recommendation of a friend, I ended up at a silent retreat in the Himalayas in September 2019. And when they first suggested it, I laughed it off and I thought, I can't do that. What will the guys at work think? But eventually I was like, I may as well give it a go. So got out there. It was literally a Buddhist temple on top of a mountain. And the best thing about that is when you get there, they take your phone off you and you just spend 10 days cut off from the outside world. So very cliche, but I came back from that and quit my job a week later.
I love it. I've always wanted to do a silent retreat, but I actually think I might not be very good at it. That's amazing. And I so relate to that. I've done my stint in the startup world and it's so much fun. There's so much energy, but it's a lot. And actually I can only imagine where you were and enter Unplugged. So where did the actual idea for the sort of cabins or the concept come from? Was it something you thought of on the retreat? Or was it when you got back and you'd kind of processed and you were just keen to get that disconnecting from your phone and then the idea came from there?
Yeah, for sure. So like many of these things, it kind of happened over a series of months and kind of different insights and then just snowballed. But I actually started about 6 months before the retreat, before we were even thinking about cabins. So read a book called Digital Minimalism, which basically does what it says on the tin. Spend less time on your phone, basically, is what they say. And he talks a lot about unplugging and unplugged and that, and thought Unplugged would be a great name for a business. Yeah. So before we were even thinking about cabins, tried to buy unplugged.com and it was, it cost £100,000. So didn't do that, but shelved that idea. And then went to the retreat and I actually had no intention of quitting my job when I left the retreat. So it's not like, I had this insight. It was a light bulb moment during the meditation. And so came back and I had to come straight back for a quarterly planning meeting. So, flew back straight after the retreat. And 2 days into that, we were trying to raise a 10 million Series A, losing £300,000 a month. And that fell through literally 2 days after I got back. So that night we closed the US, closed Australia. I was running growth at the time, effectively marketing, paused the growth spend. So I just had a week twiddling my thumbs when my boss went back and forth with investors. And it was during that time, I went for a drink with Ben, who's my now co-founder. He'd left the startup, but we'd stayed friends. And told him about this retreat, and Ben is not the kind of guy you'd find a silent retreat anytime soon. He's a very skeptical chap. And we spoke about how there's a lot of stigma around retreats and meditation. So much of the benefit is just getting people offline and into nature. And we'd heard about cabins as a business model, and they're very interesting because the economics are good, so you get a high return on capital, and more importantly, they have sex appeal. And if you really want to affect change in this day and age, you have to make it sexy. So just thought the two married together really nicely, where take this simple model of people staying in cabins and then actually productize that. So we fixed it at 3 nights. So, almost sitting somewhere between accommodation and retreat, and really focused on the digital detox, because we spoke to a whole bunch of companies, hospitality operators in the space. And what we heard is that when you try and make a digital detox a feature, people don't do it, right? So if it's like, it comes to our hotel, and you can also do a digital detox, people don't. So you need to make it the whole product, build the whole company around that. So if anything, the cabins are just a means to that end rather than the end itself.
And of course, the 3-day thing, there was actually that study that you found where it said that 3 days disconnecting from a phone and reconnecting back to nature, you sleep better, your mood's improve, your like creativity and all these like softer skills we have are just like way elevated. And did that have any influence over how you sort of mapped out this 3-day detox?
100%. I think it was that. And also that you can literally feel when you get off your phone, the first day you're a bit more anxious. And then after about 24 hours, you just feel this deep sense of calm.
Yeah.
So just wanted to make sure that people actually take the time off. And it actually made life harder for us at the start because, obviously, I think this kind of thing, people are usually staying for an average of 1.5 to 2 nights, but we're like, you have to stay for 3 nights. So there's more friction. But when people come and do it, they're like, oh, actually, I could have taken 3 nights off and the world didn't end. And we had a few people at the start who were just like, I'm just going to come and do this for 2 nights. And then afterwards, they were like, oh, I can see why I can see why you made it 3 nights. We would have loved to do that. So we want to make sure, we're basically selling an experience, and we want to make sure that people can come out of this with as much of the benefit as possible. So that's been a real kind of non-negotiable for us.
And I was fine. I feel like on holiday in the past, I've been like, I'll leave my phone at home today. And then all day you're kind of like, you'll reach your phone and you're like, oh God, it's not there. Or you're like, we're trying to scroll on anything. And you're like, aha, it's like that sort of phantom limb, but the opposite.
100%. Yeah, phantom vibration. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. So you tell people to leave their phones, lock them away. How did you then start thinking about, okay, well, what do people actually need then to survive when they've grown up with their phone 24/7, they use it for everything. And now we're telling them to just get rid of it. Like, what will they actually need to survive this 3-night trip in the wilderness?
Yeah, well, it's quite easy because, a lot of it was just listening to the excuses at the start. So we were checking people in ourselves. And the first month, we were cleaning it, checking people in ourselves. And we tried to lock people's phones away. And they were like, no way, what are you doing? So we realized that one, it's kind of won or lost before they even get there. So you need people to be excited that that's what they're coming to do. Just because if there's any indecision of like, I might lock away my phone, then when they get there, they won't, right? And the other thing we found is that you need to remove all of the excuses people will have for, getting their phone so that you can empower them to spend the time offline. So it's navigating around. So really important to have a map in there. It's, emergencies. So there's a Nokia in there if they need to contact us.
The brick. Yeah.
The brick. Yeah, exactly. And, a Polaroid camera. So just making sure that people have, the things, because we use our phone for everything nowadays. So it's how can we give people as much of that as possible so that they can actually just lock it away for 3 nights.
And I think that's so important as well. And the little Insta Max in the cabin, again, it's quite sexy. Like people love that. You always have that one friend that brings a disposable camera on holiday, and everyone's like, love it. So actually giving them these like little touches makes it into such an experience. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And the other thing, my friend stayed recently and she was like, the coffee was amazing. Because what do you intend for people to do? Is it to sit and read books or catch up around a campfire? Like, how do people use these cabins?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question. It's actually something we almost unnecessarily worried about at the start. So we thought people would get bored. It's like, oh my God, are we going to have to give people, agendas, stuff to do, all that kind of stuff. But, 3 nights goes really quickly.
Yeah.
Actually, people just do the basics, so they walk a lot, they cook, they talk if they're a couple. That's some of the most amazing feedback, which is, anyone who's been together for less than a decade probably hasn't spent a day together without their phones, right? And so when people do that and actually just have a conversation, then they're like, oh my God, we literally haven't spoken like that for, years.
Yeah.
And so I think it's doing those simple things well. And for us, again, the cabins is just a means to that end. So we want to make it a space where, it's great for sitting down and reading a book, or, being around the campfire, cozy in the winter, airy and light in the summer. So it's really just about doing the basics well.
I love that. And I'd actually love to talk about the cabins themselves. So I was talking to someone else who I think about 10 years ago was trying to put some cabins on their farm. And actually this was like, she was saying it was just before like the tiny house movement, and cabins had taken off, and everyone was like, why would you want to stay in a shepherd's hut kind of thing?
Yeah.
And yours had like a very distinct design, the architecture, that like gorgeous picture window at the end. How did that come together, and did you find it an interesting process to go through?
Yeah, for sure. So there's, although there really wasn't much in the UK, there's quite a good international kind of scene for that. So it was really just taking, I think a lot of innovation is just taking stuff that's working elsewhere and building on that.
Yeah.
So it was really, when actually flew out to stay with other concepts in, in Belgium and the US, and just really absorbed whatever was out there. We actually went to, so our first cabin was built by a Swedish manufacturer, because we thought we didn't know anything about cabins.
Good, those Swedes, aren't they?
They're good. So we trust the Scandinavians. So that was really useful as well. And it really just kind of evolved from there. And then, over time, it's about how do we kind of keep iterating, and, if anything, how do we develop a even more unique style? So I think there is, there's so much you can do, but it's also just keeping it simple. Like, we don't want to start having turrets and all these kind of things. Like, again, it's just about doing the simple thing well.
I think a really nice example of that is the maps you give people, and they're actually really, really beautifully designed, gorgeous colours, and again, just like a little part of the experience. And you really managed to get it to trickle down into all the little bits that people use. Yeah,
for sure. And some of the things I can't take any credit for most of the stuff, pretty much everything in the cabin. But one of the things that gets really great feedback is like all the signs. There's just lots of little signs, and just to, just so people know like how to light the fire, all that kind of stuff. So, brighter minds than mine did all of that, but I think those kind of things make a massive difference, just all these little details.
100%. And I'd love to ask like how it's changed. Obviously you started out, was it just the one cabin initially?
Yeah, exactly. So we launched our first cabin, just one cabin. We spent probably too long messing around with that one. So for the first 9 months, it was just Ben and I.
Yeah.
During COVID, so we had kind of rolling lockdowns. We were cleaning it, so we were driving up the M11, I think it was, every 3 days or so. So it was a real learning experience. I think we basically came to this space with no hospitality experience, no land and planning, and any of it really. So we've had to learn all these different areas, and it always feels like it's going too slow on the inside, I think, and then you meet people and like, oh my god, it's kind of growing so quickly. So I think that was a really important process to go through, just for us to really learn by just failing and getting it wrong. There was so much wrong. Our first cabin, they're off grid, so they're solar powered. Our first cabin was running out of solar power in July, and so we're like, how's this going to get through the winter? So we like completely messed it up. So I think it's really important just to get out, make mistakes, like actually get out in the weeds and see what's going on there.
100%.
And I think, that has just really set us up well, I think, for what comes next.
Yeah. And so fast forward, 2-3 years?
We launched 3 years ago.
Wow. And how many cabins do you have now?
So we have 20 cabins across the UK now.
So, and they're all over, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So we kind of started an hour or two from London, but now starting to really spread across the UK. So up to Manchester, North Wales, look at Bristol now. So it's really starting to spread out.
And were you expecting that, or was this let's see where it goes?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, it was a let's see where it goes. I think literally after that chat with Ben right at the start, I literally spent 3 hours Googling cabins on a Friday night, and I was like, this will probably work, and just went from there. And I don't know, I think we never had, we never kind of overthought where it would all end up. Just thought, it's always felt right though, like never in the 3.5 years I've been working on it have I questioned whether it's the right thing to be working on. Amazing. I think you're always questioning how you're going about it, but is this the right thing to work on? It's just never crossed my mind. So there has always, for me, felt like an inevitability that we'll figure it out and we'll get there and we'll grow. And that's important. You need that naive optimism, because of course it's not a sure thing. But I think that has really helped push through and come up with innovative solutions and, really help build a great team as well. I think that's super important. And that's probably been the biggest learning, which is every year I look back at what was the best thing we did this year. And it's always start working with this person or this person.
Yeah.
I think, a company is just a group of people. So who those people are, I think, is everything.
And I think that's what I love about Spaces is that they really do bring people together, whether that's the couple having their first day without their phones ever, or like the team behind it fixing the solar panels. Like, I just love that. So it makes a lot of sense. And speaking of people, have you been surprised by the kinds of people coming? Is it a very, distinct, burnt out ex-tech professionals, or has it been a bit more of a mixture?
Yeah, for sure. I think probably the biggest surprise early on, pretty obvious in hindsight, but we probably thought this would be more individuals going to read journal, etc., etc. It's predominantly couples, so it's probably 80% couples, 20% individuals. Makes sense, to be honest, in hindsight. And actually, so I don't think we appreciated just how big a thing it would be for couples. We've had 20 plus engagements at this point.
Really?
So yeah, it's really kind of,
oh my God.
You get a lot of couples who come back, and they'll come back 2-3 times a year, which is really awesome to see.
That's so nice.
So I think that has been really, really cool and unexpected, to be honest.
I think maybe last year you had a real big rise in like solo female travelers or something.
That's it. Yeah. We one of our team, Rebecca, she is available for calls with. She's like very enthusiastic, and so if anyone's like, definitely solo travelers are more nervous before the experience, and females generally more nervous than males. And a chat with Rebecca just completely kind of solves it for a lot of people. So she's like very bubbly, very encouraging. So that has been great, and I think it really empowers people. We were seeing before that some people who they would just be feeling nervous going into it, and then they'd be nervous when they're there, and that kind of ruined the experience for them. And so found that just by getting people in that good mindset of like understanding, also knowing there's support there if they need it, because it is a more intense experience if you're one person than if you're two. And the other thing we've really seen as we have grown as a brand is more people come to us for like burnout, digital detox, etc., etc. So like, I think in the early days, it was a lot of people just saw a cabin on Instagram, so they came to stay in the cabin. And now it's really, as we've built a reputation and, there's lots of word of mouth and all of that, then we're seeing a lot more people coming because I'm stressed at work, like just really need to spend a few days offline. So it's amazing to see that, becoming something people almost being normalized, because obviously before we were doing this, you could go and stay at an Airbnb, or you could go to a really expensive retreat that costs £3,000 for a few days. And there was nothing really in between. So it does feel like we've kind of created a bit of a category in between those two.
Well, yeah, it's funny because you said at the beginning that it almost like slowed you down in the beginning because you were like the crazy new people being like, we have a cabin with no solar power in the winter and you have to lock away your phone. And people are like, no thanks.
Yeah.
Whereas now people are like, I need the detox. I need the detachment. And like Unplugged is just like front of mind for so many people, I think. So setting that category has like really served you well, it feels, especially recently.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy where like, by succeeding, we create this. I think the future is much more malleable than people think. And, we could have, like, some very smart people told me at the start, just put up a landing page, don't go and, buy the cabin, just put up a landing page and test if people want to lock away their phone or not and just drive traffic towards it. And we could have done that, but the answer probably would have been that more people didn't want to lock their phone away, and then we would have gone and built that business. And that's just not the business we want to build. And it's not the change we want to make in society. So I think sometimes you have to be unreasonable. You have to be irrational. And that does pay off in surprising ways. So like we were filming, I was doing some filming for Top Gear a couple of weeks ago.
Exciting.
Because they're basically a media company now, and they get car companies coming to them to promote new cars. And Renault promoting this 4x4 that they basically want to drive from London to Scotland. They meet 3 characters along the way. And the third one is a mountain runner in Scotland. The middle one is an astronomer at a dark skies park. And the first one is me driving it to one of our cabins. And so it's like all these weird opportunities because they were looking for like digital detox. So because we've positioned there and we're owning that niche, then you do just get, I think, you kind of maximize serendipity, just all these like weird little things. So that's been a big plus.
Yeah. And like timing wise, you launched literally in the middle of COVID, global pandemic. So I'd first off like to hear about that. But then also, I guess, if anything, that's created a worldwide stressed out, sad population. People have been stuck at home with nothing to do but scroll miserable news on their phone, catch up via Zooms, actually being able to do it in real life and get that detox, like the timing or like when it's come in this sort of worldwide pandemic is quite fortuitous for you, really.
100%. Yeah, I think we got really lucky with the timing.
Yeah.
So actually when we launched the first month, we sold about 2 stays, and one of those was my sister's and the other was some friend of friends.
And we paid them to go, yeah.
Yeah, so the launch was not a huge success, but after that something just clicked, and we just got for really, I mean, we still do today, but we just got so much inbound PR just because of the timing, basically. No genius of our own, like complete luck. Anytime we tried to do PR on the early days, it failed. But we would just get, every single publication, influencers, like you name it, getting in touch because of how topical it was during COVID. And the year after that was the summer of staycations. So, every cabin in the country was just absolutely chock-a-block full. So it's pros and cons, like things that look like, negatives at the time turn out to be positives and vice versa. Like actually that summer of staycations in 2021 was great at the time, but what it meant is that we maybe didn't build the marketing muscles for filling cabins. We actually had a bit of a correction the year after, and it's only now that we've really kind of really shored that up and got to a stage where we're good at filling our own cabin. So we still got a decent occupancy last year, but I think suffered from maybe the year before that. So in hindsight, you never know how something's going to turn out. And so I think the lesson there is that there is good in everything, and it's just kind of looking for it.
What a lovely lesson. We'll take that. And do you find that most people are looking to escape in sort of more spring, summer, or do people quite like to go in the autumn and winter and hunker down, put the fire on?
Yeah, exactly. So we have really strong demand all year round. I would say the 2 months that are slightly quieter are December and January, and a lot of that is because December's a bit of a party month in London, and January, we obviously haven't been getting as many bookings in December, but we can, again, there is some charm to, hunkering down with the fire, etc. So we see, even then we're kind of 65-70% occupancy in those quieter months. So it's popular all year round. And I think for us, it's just changing that message. And actually that's a really nice kind of other touch point for people with the brand. Whereas if they've come in the summer and gone for hikes and sat outside by the fire pit and, all of these things, and then they want to come in the winter and just read for 3 days inside by the fire, then it's a nice contrast and gives people some variety to interact with the brand.
I really like the idea that as well you could go in summer and do a reflection on, the last 6 months and where you're at and how you're feeling, and take that time out. And then you come back 6 months later, and again, you can sort of pause, take stock, and sort of get in this schedule, checking in on yourself, seeing where you're at, how you're feeling, but making sure you have these pockets of time to look forward to and take a moment for yourself. I really love that.
100%. Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, I try and do it every 3 months or so, and always come out of it like, oh God, why am I doing all these things, and cancel like half the meetings, if not more, that I had in the weeks coming up to that. So I think it's a really good reset, not only for how the obvious things like the kind of how you're interacting with various devices, but it's just when you get that space, when you take the phone away for 3 days, it just gives you a really good chance to just reflect on your whole life, and you're actually like, hey, I haven't seen this person in ages and I really miss them, and so it's like those things. I always come out of the experience, with a kind of renewed, I would say, compassion for the people who are closest to me. Like it is when you take away the busyness and just the overstimulation. Yeah. And you realize more what's important. And I think you do need that reset every now and again.
Definitely. And I think everyone living in London and beyond is probably guilty of, we're rubbish at doing nothing. Yeah. Just sitting there and doing absolutely nothing is really hard for so many people. So actually this sort of enforced having to take that time and just think about you and how you're doing and checking in. Like, it's so important, and we're all rubbish at it. So I think that's really impressive that you get people to actually do that for 3 days.
Yeah. Have you done it? Done something similar at any point?
I do try and do the odd day here and there. I get off my phone. But then almost the worst bit is you come back to it and it's suddenly you've got comms to catch up on. Like, all the WhatsApp chats have popped off. Right. But I do love it. And actually, I'm having had this chat, I'm very keen to do 3 days, because I imagine I've only got that sort of like the first day itch. Like, I just want to check my phone all the time. So I'd quite like to push through to the calm and the serenity of being disconnected. I'd actually love to talk to you about how you find your sites. Like, what do you look for, and how do the economics behind it work? Do you like buy the land, or do you work in partnerships with local landowners? How does that all work?
Yes, we just work on a straight revenue share with landowners, and there's a big need for farm diversification, which I'm sure you see a lot of. because a lot of the money's going out of farming.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of very significant land holdings, a lot of really beautiful countryside that's just looking for interesting things to do with it. So we, in the early stages, just did a lot of cold outreach, basically. Got our first few sites like that, then worked with a whole bunch of land agents, and we've now got to a stage where we're really starting to get a lot of inbound as well.
Okay.
So it's kind of both got some really interesting chats with like much bigger organizations who have lots of land, but then also, we get a lot of interesting estates and even smaller holdings on very interesting locations as well. And the key for us is, I think in the early days it's all about experimenting and it's like, let's do this and this and just see what people resonate with more. So we tried a lot of things, and variety is super important as well. Because if you think about our portfolio of cabins, it really adds something to, our guests if there is that choice, right? Like we just launched a couple in the north of Wales, which are a little bit more mountainous. I mean, they'd probably class as hills rather than mountains, but it's just a bit more adventurous, and people absolutely love that. You've got people driving up from London to North Wales, especially to go and stay at these cabins. So for us, it's, really just about how can we keep experimenting and keep pushing the bar as well, like keep challenging what's possible there and have more and more interesting locations and just listen to people. We obviously have a good social presence now, ironically. So it's just see what people want, and just really letting that dictate. I think, again, what we're trying to do, the change we're trying to make in the world is the constant, but how we get there and how that evolves, very flexible. So really just kind of going with the flow and trying to surrender to it all.
I love that. So expanding new sites to variety, is this the main focus for Unplugged for the next chapter, or are there other projects or initiatives in the pipeline?
Yeah, there's a couple of projects in the pipeline, can't quite talk about yet.
Intriguing.
It's really just starting to, challenge how we do things and just keep upping the bar and getting as many people as possible offline. I think that's the big thing, is like, how can we both, get more people excited to do this, which is, very much about really building a kind of strong brand and getting people to come have a great experience and go away and talk about it. But then how can we also help people, who want to make this a habit and who want to do this every 6 to 12 months, and just thinking about how we develop the project, the product to, be interesting and be what people are looking for in terms of that. So I think lots of very exciting things I'm sure will come, many that I'm not even thinking about yet. So we'll just go with the flow and see what happens.
I love it. Well, I'm definitely excited. I'm going to be booking in for my 3-day detox. I won't even take my phone with me. I'm very excited. It's been so fun to chat. Before we do go, I've just got one quick game of Dream Spaces to play with you.
Love it.
I'm going to ask you 3 questions.
Okay.
And for each one, you're going to answer with a space. It can be somewhere you've been before, you go back to, or somewhere that's been on your list to visit.
Yeah.
So number 1, actually, now I'm thinking about this one might not work so well for you. Where are you going to detox and get away from it all? And you can't say Unplugged.
I can't say Unplugged. I would love to go to I can't say a cabin. I'd love to go back to kind of monastery in the mountains.
Really?
There's something, just the quiet there. There's something magical about the silence. So I think, I've done it a couple of times, but I could see myself doing
another silent retreat. Are there any countries you'd like to go to for that, or?
I've done the first one I did was Indian, so Tibetan Buddhism. I'd love to try the Japanese.
Wow, yeah.
Zen Buddhism and just I think I don't identify as Buddhist or religious or anything like that, but there's wisdom in all these different practices, and I think it's just understanding that and the stories behind them, and because it's wisdom that's been around for thousands of years, and we can all learn from it.
Absolutely, I love that. Okay, this is slightly different. Your ultimate birthday party.
Yeah.
Where are you hosting it?
That's a good question. I'm not a big party person, so I don't know. I think, I'm not going to say in a monastery. And
it's an invite list of 1.
I think there's something magical about DC, so I would probably take people to we'll stick English, so I'll go for a
staycay.
Nice country house by the sea in Cornwall.
Lovely.
Like that.
Oh, that sounds gorgeous. Okay, and last one, once in a lifetime bucket list trip. Where are you going, and are you staying anywhere special?
Yeah, good question. Bucket list trip. again, not to sound like a broken record, but I think there's something quite magical about the stillness. So I would do something like Antarctica.
Ooh.
And I think accommodation choices are going to be limited there. Just go somewhere really remote. And I think, this idea of retreating, so you go on retreats, but also go somewhere very remote and quiet, like Antarctica. Like, I don't think it was retreating to get away from the world. I think of it as like retreating to come back better, and turn up better for the world. So yeah, somewhere in Antarctica, maybe a little porter cabin, as far down as you can go.
Wow. What a lovely note to finish on. Thank you so much, Hector. It's been such a pleasure.
Such a joy. And I'm so glad you're doing this podcast. You're a wonderful host. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Oh. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Curated Spaces podcast. For more information and content around any of the spaces we feature, head to our website or Instagram, and don't forget to subscribe to have new episodes delivered straight to your inbox every Wednesday. And if there's a special place in your life that you'd like to hear on the Curated Spaces podcast, please do get in touch, as we're always on the lookout for more brilliant spaces to share with the world.